Okay.
Great, wonderful. So hello everyone. I hope you're doing super well today. Today we have a really exciting session with my friend Richmond. Richmond works at Bit Egg, and he's going to be talking to us about puppets and skeletal animation for games, specifically in 2D. And he's going to go over some common mistakes and how to fix them. We are going to be using Spine. There is a free version that you can download and check out. You can also get alternate versions in different places if you so wish. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Um, but anyway, Richmond, the floor is yours. If you'd like, please introduce yourself and go on ahead.
All right. Thanks, Ashraf. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, so I'll just give you a quick introduction. Well, first off, intro to the talk itself. Um, I really should have done the about me first. I'll do that first. So my name's Richmond Lee. I'm the co-founder of BitEgg. We're one of the leading indie game development studios from Thailand. We also do art and animation outsourcing. Um, I've been working 17 years in games, 10 years specializing in Spine, which is the program I'll mostly be referencing here today. Um, yeah, so the talk here today um, is about 2D skeletal animation. So first, we're just going to talk about the concept of, what is this at all, right? Because it's actually one of the most common ways to animate for games today, but it's not really discussed as much as, say, 3D animation, pixel art, hand-drawn art, even though it's actually super common, right? So there's not even really consensus on the name, but for the purpose of this talk, I'll be calling it 2D skeletal animation. Um, so this talk, I will be using the program Spine as reference. But this is not going to be like an intro to how to use Spine. There's already tons of really good tutorials on that. There's tons of great stuff on YouTube. You can go to their website, the Esoteric Software website. You can find all the documentation you need. So this isn't a guide to Spine. Rather, this is me talking about through 10 years of experience, what are the most common mistakes that popped up in my decade of using Spine, doing the style of animation, right? And then how can you fix those mistakes? So hopefully this talk will be interesting to both people who've never used Spine, maybe it'll get you interested in it, people who are just beginners, and also people who are pros. So these are these issues that, in my experience, when you run into them, it's super annoying if you don't know what to do. And from Googling around, a lot of this stuff, it's not even easy to put into words what you should search for. So a lot of it's not that well documented. So hopefully, if you've used Spine or you're going to use it in the future, hopefully someday this talk will be useful to you. Okay. All right. Yeah. So. A little bit about BitEgg. So, like I said, we're Thai, based in Thailand. We're one of the biggest indie game developers in Thailand, and we also do a lot of art and animation outsourcing. It's actually really not. That's pretty common for a lot of indie AA developers. We do contract work to keep the lights on, keep our skills sharp. Um, and also it's just fun. Like we've worked with some really great companies like Way Forward, Square Enix, and we've done a lot of spine animation. We also make our own games. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Two of the games we have in development are Lost and Found Co. and Zeka Tactics. Um, Lost and Found Co. is actually entirely animated in Spine. So it's a super cute hidden object game, and it's kind of like Where's Waldo meets Sanrio with a very distinct Thai touch. And it's just, our goal with this game is to make these really immersive, lively worlds with thousands of unique characters. Everything you click on has unique animation, and the whole thing's animated in Spine. It's a very it's one of my favorite programs to animate in. Yeah. So yeah, like I really dig Spine. By the way, the game's out. The demo's out on Steam if you'd like to try it out. And just another game we're working on is This one's 3D. Um, it's a turn-based mecha strategy tactics RPG, very classic mecha anime inspired. I was just throwing that in there just to show that we're an active company. We got some cool projects going on. Hopefully, I know what I'm talking about here. Um, all right, so these are some games that we've worked on that actually used 2D skeletal animation, and most of these are they were animated in Spine. We do a lot of work for Way Forward. They are a independent developer based in California in the U.S. They've been making this series Shantae for decades now. It started off on the Game Boy Color. That console's probably older than most of the people tuning into this video. Yeah, so it started off as a sprite-based game, and then over time, when they went HD, they started using 2D skeletal animation to animate it. Right, so it's a combination of hand-drawn parts and then kind of manipulating the parts using a skeleton. We also worked on Spider Swords. That was another title for them. That was an Apple Arcade launch title by WayForward. And then we worked on Indivisible uh, for Lab Zero. Sorry, I've now rest in peace, Lab Zero, now defunct. But they created Skullgirls, and they created this very beautiful RPG, Indivisible. And we helped them out with, as you can see here, these are all their. They did a crowdfunding campaign, and they let people put their own original OCs in the game, and we took that big chunk of work from them, and we animated it in Spine because Spine's really good for if you just take a still image and cut it apart and make it move. Um, and this was actually one of the last games I personally animated on. These days, I do, all my time is spent in management and, going to conventions and doing presentations like this, which I love. But no, I also really enjoy animating. This was one of the last things I animated when at Bit Egg. All right. We also worked on Card Shark, really cool. This game had a really cool like Russian animation style to it. Paper cutout, right? Because that's the principles that go into this style of animation. They've been around forever, right? It's they've been around for centuries, maybe even thousands of years. When you go back to paper puppets, shadow puppet performances. Um, it's actually a very ancient technique in roots. Right? We also do a lot of live 2D work, right? So this is some example of a live 2D that's also 2D skeletal driven animation. And we've done a lot of work for just lots of like Japanese mobile games unless you live in Japan, you probably haven't heard of them. All right. So I'm talking a lot about 2D skeletal animation. Like what is it exactly? Oh, thank you. So 2D skeletal animation, as I mentioned before, this is now by far the most common way to animate for 2D games. If you look at most mobile games that require 2D movement, and nowadays a ton of indie games, even a ton of like AA, AAA games when they animate their like portraits and stuff, they use this system called this method. I'm sorry, method called 2D skeletal animation. Um, so like I said, it's very ubiquitous, but it's hard to talk about because we don't even have a common term for it. So I'm calling it 2D skeletal animation. That is what most of the software that uses this technique, they refer to it as that. Some people call it 2D bone-based animation, but probably the most popular term that I've heard is puppet animation. Um, in fact, if you could put it in the chat, like, what do you think? What did you know this as? Like, what would you have used? What term would you use to refer to this, right? Because I'm really interested to know, like, um, yeah, what is the popular term for this? Yeah, so the technical term, 2D skeletal animation, which I'm going to use for this talk. The popular term, probably puppet animation or paper doll animation. Okay, so what is it? Basically, 2D skeletal animation is when you take 2D images, just flat images, usually hand drawn, but it could be anything as long as it is a flat ping, typically a ping. And you take those and you attach them to bones, and then you put the bones together in a rig, right? And it's just a really fun, ingenious way of animating in 2D. Um, each part that you attach to the bone can actually be swapped, so you can still do frame by frame animation per part. Let's say like you want to do, you know, the hand opening or closing, right? You don't need to rig every finger. You can just redraw it. That'd be faster sometimes. Or maybe you need to do, the body turning or something. So you can swap the parts out, and it's basically it takes the all the cool stuff you can do in 3D and it applies it to 2D. These engines are actually technically 3D engines. They just, everything's sort of on a forced like 2D plane. Yeah, so when you animate using this method, it's bone-driven animation. So just like 3D, you can get interpolations, you can do keyframes, all that good stuff. Um, you can even do blending animation and procedural animations. You can do physics, and you have access to meshes too. So all the stuff you could do in 3D. So meshes are like more of an advanced feature. I think probably over the last couple of years, you've probably seen these looping GIFs, that people often share from games where it's like 2D, but it's like it kind of feels 3D, right? Is that sort of a familiar sight, I imagine, for most of you? Like for instance, a lot of MOBAs might use it in their portraits, or card games like Hearthstone that use this style. And increasingly, in-game graphics, the in-game controllable character will also use meshes for these more pseudo 3D. It's technically actually 3D, but implemented as pseudo 3D. It's really fun. Right. Right. So why has it become the standard for 2D games? Um, right. So Spine specifically is it's very popular, very standard. It's compatible with all the major game engines out there, like Unity, Unreal, and the technique in general. The reason why people would use it over, say, hand drawing everything or exporting everything as sprite sheets is uh, for the same reason you use 3D. You get the same advantages. It's smaller file sizes, right? So you are not exporting these huge high definition 2D animations frame by frame. You're just exporting a high definition sprite sheet, which is then manipulated by the bones, right? And it's very lightweight. Um, yeah, it's just a very 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 cool system for 2D. And if you're already familiar with any of these programs over here, I don't know, are you all familiar with like Flash, Blender, Maya, 3D S Max, Toon Boom? Yeah, if you're at all familiar with just anything that uses like tweening and keyframes, and especially if you know 3D, then you can very easily pick up 2D skeletal-based animation. It's just a flattened version of 3D essentially. Cool. Looks like a lot of y'all are ready. Okay, so like I said, the most popular software for it for game development is Spine. It's pretty much industry standard. I do a lot of outsourcing. We get a lot of clients requesting this Spine specifically. It's very easy to learn. Like I mentioned, if you know any of these programs, you'll be able to pick it up quickly. And best of all, there's tons of documentation. Like whatever you want to learn, it's on YouTube, and you can also go to their website, esotericsoftware.com. They have lots of really good tutorials. So that's why I'm not going to get into the into like, this isn't an introduction to how to use it. I'm going to kind of skip ahead until like when you've already used it and you started to run into some problems. But first, some other software that's popular for 2D skeletal animation. Who here has heard of Live2D or VTubers? I think everyone with access to YouTube has probably seen some VTubers by now, right? Um, let me know if you have any favorites. Do anyone have any? I I'm a little bit this is like not quite my generation, but a lot of our team members at BitEgg, they're super into VTubers. I think it's really cool. But yeah, so live 2D, skeletal based animation 2D, but it's optimized for streaming for these VTuber rigs. So you can do really cool stuff like motion tracking, and it's really good for when you want to animate essentially like a portrait shot, like someone generally facing the camera, usually talking, maybe some simple gestures. Um, it's really excellent for portraits, but if you need to do like your typical action-oriented in-game animations, you're probably not going to use Live 2D. Spine or some of the other alternatives are a lot easier for that. Um, so a really good alternative to Spine is Dragon Bones, and this program has been around quite a while. It's been around, I think, probably more than 10 years. It's really similar to Spine. The quality is actually pretty comparable. The interface, the UX are very similar, and it's not just because they're copying. It's just there's sort of like kind of an optimal way to present information, and they both kind of converged on the same same thing. I think they were developed around the same time. But Dragon Bones is it's free, open source. I just posted the website right there. So if you're interested, why not give it a shot, right? And I just want to, kind of pass the mic to y'all. Can you think of some games that use 2D skeletal animation? Just type it in the chat. Like, what are some games that you know of that maybe that you like or that you're a fan of? You know, yeah, Jetpack Joyride. Yep, yeah, yeah. It has a nice sprite style, but they actually do a lot of rigging and a lot of rotations. Um, lately a lot of games that look a lot of sprite-based games, yeah, use this method. It's actually very good for that. In fact, if we have some extra time at the end, I could maybe give you some tips on how to use this for sprite-based stuff. But yep, Don't Starve. That one used it in like a very simple way. Uh, Maple Story. What did Maple Story look like? I'm trying to remember if it was totally sprite-based or. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Maple Story, they had a modular animation system. So yeah, I think they would have used 2D skeletal. I don't know if they actually had skeletons, if it was like a 3D engine, but same principles. Yep. Okay, cool. All right. Do you, do you mind if I go into like a little tangent before we get into the problems? The identifying the problems and stuff. I really like the history of games. I'm an animator by trade, and even before that, I always loved video games since I was a little kid. Always dreamed of making games. Um, so can you think of like the earliest games that use this, right? Like you already listed some really good ones like Jetpack Joyride, Maple Story goes way back into like the early browser games. Um, so a lot of people think that, as far as games go, they think that the root of 2D skeletal animation is in games is Spine, right? But no, sorry, not Spine. It's Flash, right? Flash was, originally Macromedia Flash. They were acquired by Adobe, became the global standard for years and years, right? So much of the internet used to run on Flash. You used to be able to watch Flash cartoons, play Flash games, right? I'm sure. Did 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 y'all like play on like Newgrounds, like a lot of the games on there, right? A lot of those would have been animated with a similar principle. Um, yeah, but the thing is, this style of animation for games, it goes back way further. right? Let me just pull up some examples. So let's see. Uh, right. So one of the earliest ones um, is oh, how do you pronounce this? Hold on. This is an old arcade game, Genpei Tomaden. This is an old yeah, this is an old arcade game by Namco. This was from like when I was like a little kid. This was like the equivalent of like a AAA game back then. And one of the cool things about this game is it had these like absolutely like for the time massive sprites, right? And as you can see, back in the day, the hardware was very weak, right? Like I mean, you literally people have like probably have refrigerators with more powerful like like hardware than what these games were programmed on. Um, so they also had very limited memory. So as you can see here, they ingeniously animated these huge, smoothly for the time animated characters by splitting them up. They're actually comprised of several different sprites layered on top of each other by rotating. So yeah, this is one of the earlier games that uses this technique. Um, really cool, weird old game. And then the absolute oldest one that I know of. So I have not played every game out there on in the world or on MAME, but as far as I know, this is the oldest one that lets you use that technique as the playable character. Because you know, in a lot of old games, you'd have these big multi sprite boss characters, right? But oh yeah. The last one was 86. This one is even older. This, but check it out. This is like an early. It's actually a fighting game. It's kind of a versus fighting game, and it's all about fencing. Yep. It's called Great Sword Master, and it achieves this really silky smooth animation. I think it still looks nice now. Um, and it does it using sort of a proto 2D skeletal animation. And this is old Taito game. When did this come out? It's 84. It's ancient, right? So yeah, this is a very ancient game technique. And then have you heard of the game Unicorn Overlord? Has anyone heard of that game? Okay, so this is an upcoming game for, well, it's actually already out. It's on Switch and PlayStation, I think Xbox too. I wish it would come to Steam. Um, right now it's console only, but this is the latest game from a company called Vanillaware. And they're actually one of the great innovators of 2D skeletal animation in games. And I think they're still one of the best. If you are interested in this technique, I really recommend looking into the games of Vanillaware. Um, they were one of my biggest inspirations for starting my own game development studio. They're a really tiny studio. They don't call themselves indie, but they very much embody the indie spirit. Really small team, been working together forever. They take all the money from one game, put it into the next game, and hope to keep going. And everyone on their team is an artist. Like even their programmers are good at drawing, and it shows in their games. Like their games are just really marvelously crafted, really beautiful. Um, and the reason I point them out in this talk is that they have been doing this style of animation since 1997. So technically, this is an Atlas game. This was before Vanillaware formed, but they did a game called Princess Crown. And this is one of the first games to really use this technique, this of 2D skeletal animation as we know it today. Earlier games were more sprites being programmatically manipulated, so they had very robotic movement. This game, they actually stuck these sprites on a 3D rig, moved them around really smoothly, timed the animations beautifully. And then they had the foresight to also do frame by frame animation on top of the rotations. And this game was just like so far ahead of its time. So this came out in 1997, which was also the same year that Flash released their animation system. So this game actually pretty much predates like every Flash game, and you can remember how kind of simple and primitive Flash games were, right? For the first few years, really right up to the end. There, a lot of them were very rough looking, but this company, or rather, so the director, his name's George Kamitani. They really, really nailed this technique, like like almost 30 years ago, and they never stopped doing it. So yeah, if just quick history lesson there. If you're interested in this technique, definitely look up Vanillaware. Okay, they do really cool stuff. Okay, back to the slides. Okay, finally we are getting to the actual meat of this presentation. Right. So now that I have a clear idea of just what 2D skeletal animation is, let's talk about some of the most common mistakes. Right. So I'll split this up into several parts, but the first part focuses on illustration. Right. So this is the first step. Even before you start rigging, way before you start animating, you actually have to draw the pieces or render them, however you want to do it. So these are some tips pertaining to that. Right. So the easiest way to do it is to already have all the parts separated in layers. This takes some trial and error, it takes some experience to get it right. But generally, the workflow is that you draw the pieces separately. You kind of already know how you're going to rig them, what pieces will rotate. And then usually like spine and dragon bones, they will automate they will import the layers into the program already in place. Uh, and you still have to make the bones, but they'll at least everything will be in the right place. Um, now, before you even get to this step, it's a really good idea just to do some thumbnails of just your overall approach. I know this seems really basic, but a lot of times people forget just how powerful it is to have like pencil and paper next to you while you're planning things. So definitely like sketch out your overall plan ahead of time. And if you don't have that much experience with it, if you can, consult with people. Maybe ask anyone who has done it before, like, hey, am I thinking about this the right way? And it's okay just to do like a super rough sketch, right? So yeah, just plan ahead a little bit before you start, right? Okay. So another common issue is that your source image that you're starting off with is flattened, right? So this means that you need to break it apart and flesh it out, right? So the best way to do this is to just kind of again do a rough sketch on top and just kind of map out the different areas, right? Like okay, the head is here, the neck is behind, and I need about like this much clearance into the head so that when it moves, it's not just blank space behind the head, right? Again, it's super useful just to start planning ahead. um, yeah, you can start thinking about the face, right? Do you want to separate the eyes and the nose? Like if you're going to kind of do some pseudo 3D, you definitely should. If you're not going to do that at all, then you don't have to, right? So this is just pretty basic stuff. Okay, so after you do that, the next step is to work out your sorting order, because that's super important. Because 2D skeletal animation works with 2D planes layered on top of each other, right? That means they're always going to be on top, right? This hand is always going to be in front of this hand. Now, when you start animating, you can change the layer order, but in the rig, you need a very set order. So it's good to start planning that in advance. And then as you start breaking it apart, generally you probably want to go from like top to bottom. It's just easier that way. Okay, and now here, this one, this is super important. How many of you are illustrators? Like, how many of you like to do digital painting? Anyone? You can just say yes in the chat or raise your hand or something. Great. So I think yes, yes. So when you illustrate, do you use the adjustment layers, right? Do you ever use like multiply or screen, any of those effects, right? Those are like super duper useful for illustration, right? They're wonderful. They're one of the best parts of digital painting. But the thing is, if you're breaking it up into layers, those effects will not export with the pieces, right? So this is a really, really common mistake that I see when people are just beginning to do illustration for spine. They just start off treating it just as a normal illustration, and then they're done. And then they're like, at the very end, they're like, oh shoot, like these blend modes, they're just simply not gonna translate. Um, so if you can, just try to avoid using the blend modes at all. Or if you do have to use them, uh, flatten them, right? Flatten them, bake them into the layer before you export. And for people who, I know a lot of people love to like use hundreds of layers, right? They get so many subtle effects in there. If that's how you like to work, not a problem. That's okay. Um, it's just what you'll need to do is, rather than just completely upending your workflow, do your workflow and then flatten it. And then just, you have to resign yourself to like, after it's been flattened, you have to cut it out from a flat image. But if that's your process, that'll probably be faster, flattening it and then cutting out again. That'll be faster than just not using all the effects that you need to achieve the rendering that you need. Right. Yeah. So often, yeah, just flatten it. Okay. Another very common error when working in this technique is you get the character into the program, and then I mentioned before, like let's say you have a head, right? Let's say it turns out uh, you need the pupils to move, right? And you forgot to separate the pupils, or you need the eyebrows to emote, and you forgot to separate them, right? A lot of times, you'll get it into spine or dragon bones or whatever you're using, and then it's like, oh shoot, I should have separated that. So it's just a good idea in general, just to remember when you are preparing these things to be imported into your spine or whatever your program of choice is, it's better to err on the side of like too many layers, right? Um, just probably separate the parts into more layers than you think you need, and then if it's pretty clear that you don't need them, you can flatten them. Just flatten them into the base. Let's say like, oh, okay, I didn't need to separate the eyes. Flatten it into the head, and then delete the eye part from your rig. Um, does that make sense? Um, okay, cool. Thank you. All right. This is another just super, super common problem. I think this is just common sense, but make sure that your source illustration is not too low resolution. Um, Once in a while, people just kind of forget, right? Generally, it's a really good idea to work at least 2 times the resolution that you expect the final output to be. The nice thing about spine is that generally you just need that one flattened source. So, it's not as if it's going to export like, uh, it's not like, say, working with the movie file where you're like, oh man, should I work 4K or like 1080p, right? Like that's going to really, really affect like how long it's going to take to render and stuff. But a flat image generally, whether it's 2 times or 1 times the size, it's not going to make that much difference. And again, you can always go smaller. It's much harder to scale up. Right, so that's just super basic. Okay, another thing to remember is remember the final size that your character is actually, your character, whatever you're making, is going to appear in your game. Because I've seen in a lot of games, there's just way too many details, and they just get lost when everything's shrunken down, and it's just a lot of extra work that the artist didn't really need to do. I mean, unless you are going to zoom in at some point, or maybe you want to use it for promo art later. But even then, I think it would be better to have like a separate lower detail version for the game, because you don't want those details to kind of like get crunched down and look kind of like just um, it's just going to look wrong, right? So keep in mind, yeah, generally if you're working with a small character, obviously like lower level of detail is okay, right? Yeah, so again, this is a Thai ghost. It's a classic Thai ghost, a character in early prototype of our game Lost and Found Co. And yeah, you can see this game's way zoomed out, so we just developed a really simple art style. Like, just don't need to go high with the details, and it reads really well, even at a tiny size. Okay, this one is a bit abstruse. This one is a kind of weird problem. This is something that you'll run into maybe if you're trying to work with transparencies. You closely over here, right? There's the front layer and the back layer transparency, right? And because they're both constrained to the same bones, um, oftentimes there's going to be little discrepancies on the edge, right? So if you're way zoomed out, you might not notice, but this is something where, for instance, if you're working on, say, a game with like huge portraits, like people will notice. And this is something that in the past, like our clients were like, oh, that edge, that's off. That's not up to our standard of quality. You got to fix that, right? So how do you fix this? Well, the solution is actually pretty simple. What you do is if you're layering transparencies on top of each other and you need that edge to line up, you can hide those breaks by just make the very outer edge where it overlaps like 100% opacity, and then it slowly falls off into the transparency, right? And yeah, no more strange, like kind of warbling edges there, right? So that's the difference. Yeah, make it 100% opacity on the edge and then have it fall off, right? Yes, and I think it does look nicer too, right? Because that actually is how fabric works, right? Like transparent fabric, the more of its own fabric you see behind it and bunched up and stuff, it gets more opaque. Yeah, so cool. Okay, this one is just good housekeeping. um, you have to name your layers properly, and it's best to do that in the drawing phase in Photoshop or Painter, whatever your program of choice is. These days, generally anything that can output a PSD, and then most of these programs will be able to take that PSD, automate it, and stack everything in the correct order for you. But you have to make sure that you don't repeat names for the layers, right? Because when you get the pieces into your program of choice, whether it's Spine or Dragon Bones or whatever, like any computer program, it's going to get really confused when there's identical file names. Like, so just make sure that every single layer is named differently, and make sure that you give them real names too. Don't just call it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you're going to make life so difficult for yourself when you're actually rigging, right? Okay, so um, put in the time in this drawing phase to just properly label everything. Because again, these programs now, they will carry those names over automatically for you into the rig. in the animation program. Yeah. There's some times where like I'm lazy and I'm like, it's a simple character. I don't need to, or I'm just in a rush, and it always like bites you in the butt later. Okay. All right. This one is really important piece of advice. It sounds simple, but it took me a long time to really, really understand this. When you do this style of animation, like don't overthink things. So I know I mentioned earlier, like, when in doubt, like kind of draw more layers than you think you need. That's fine as long as you don't have to think too hard about that, right? But when you get into the advanced like rigging and animating, you start getting into stuff like swapping out the parts, you know, um, for instance, like stuff with like kind of turns, like those are anything that rotates right along a XY plane, right? That's easy. But once you start kind of rotating in 3D space, that gets more difficult. And a lot of times, you might be tempted to draw like so many different head turns and draw like pivot, turns for every part. Don't do that unless you absolutely need to, right? Just start off as simple as you can, and then only draw the new parts when you absolutely need it, when you're absolutely sure that you definitely need that. Because early on, it's really tempting to try to make a one rig that can do everything and to try to anticipate every problem that might come up. Um, but one that's very anxiety inducing, and it's this you're going to spend so much time trying to solve problems that even haven't even happened yet. And then two, the most frustrating thing is you're going to spend all that time and then you're going to run into a problem that like you couldn't have possibly have, uh, you know, considered. So in general, keep things simple and just wait for those problems to happen and then solve them as they pop up. Don't try to solve problems that you might not even need to solve. Okay, so those were the drawing mistakes. Here are some rigging mistakes, some very common rigging mistakes. And the key theme throughout all of this is for rigging, keep stuff as simple as possible. So as I mentioned before, once you get into the more advanced techniques for 2D skeletal animation, you start messing with the meshes, right? Because these are actually 3D programs putting meshes onto bones. Now, the cool thing about the meshes is you get these really smooth like blends. You get a lot of control over the image. Um, and it can be really tempting to create like a really detailed mesh. It's the same thing for 3D, right? I'm sure a lot of you have worked in 3D, and a lot of times you just put way more edge loops and stuff in there than you actually need, right? So um, try to do stuff with as few subdivisions as possible, just like 3D. Even though in Spine you're not going to use like a million polygons. You're never going to go over the triangle budget, but nonetheless, imagine you do have a limited budget and like just try to keep the rig simple, right? Don't make them more complex until you absolutely need to. Okay. Second common mistake is you got to use weight painting. Um, so uh, so like 3D, right? These meshes are bound to the bones with painted weights, and the simplest form of it is everything's just 100%, right? That's how Flash was, right? In Flash, you didn't get these meshes and these like nice distortions. It was just 100% like a physical paper puppet, right? Um, but in Spine, I'm actually going to boot up the program. Give me one sec, and I'll just show you how it works. Um, don't be afraid to do weight painting. Uh, and okay, so this is the standard character in Spine. And let's see, how do you, sorry, it's been a while. I haven't used it in a while. Let's see, wait, see that, there we go. And then There we go. All right. So yeah, just like 3D, you can see that. So this is actually just one piece, right? So when it animates, you can see that like hair bounce, right? There's like some pseudo 3D in the head rotation, but it's just one piece. And you can see they achieved that effect by painting the weights. And if you've never done weight painting, where it can seem a little bit scary, yeah, we could go higher. But uh, you know, as you can see here, they kept the geometry simple, and that made the weight painting way more simple. And it's it's really quite simple, right? It's you have your orange bone. Orange bone corresponds to the orange color, right? And let's say you're like, oh, you know what? I want this one to be like less influenced. Let's see. Oh, you can do auto weights. Yeah. You know what? No. I'm getting too into the nitty gritty. Basically, keep your meshes simple. Don't be afraid to paint weights. You can look up a tutorial on it. It's not as hard as you think. Okay. Um, I, I only have this slide because I know a lot of people they're afraid to get into this, and it's not hard. Okay. Another common problem, just as people tend to do overly complex meshes, they also tend to do too many bones, right? So this is an example from Indivisible, and this was done by one of our junior animators at the time, and they went nuts with the bones, just like bones following like every contour, every strand of hair, and it's yeah, you don't need that much. You can simplify it, and in fact, you could simplify it even more than my example here. But yeah, basically, yeah, try to do stuff with as little bones, as little meshes as possible. Right. Okay. Another tip. Um, color coordinate your bones, right? Because you can see on the left when everything's gray, it starts to get very difficult to figure out what piece you're trying to select, right? Even with a super simple character like this is Ducky from Lost and Found Co. Really simple drawing style, flat colors, no shading, but it gets really hard to see, um, even with a simple rig. So, color coordinate, right? Like this leg is purple, the other leg's green, this arm's red. Makes it super, super easy to animate. Again, slightly more, well, way more complex character, but yeah, you can see, especially with like more neutral colored characters, the default gray color just it gets lost. So make your life easier. Color coordinate the bones. It's really easy. Doesn't take much time. Another issue, just like people who don't name their layers, right? If you don't do that, then your bones and your nodes, they also down the line don't get automatically named, and then you end up with no idea which one of these is the eye, the nose, the tie, right? Like, yeah. Whereas if you have it labeled, or better yet, you actually have a naming convention you use in your studio, then it's a breeze finding the part that you need. Okay. This one is also really important. This is an issue you'll probably run into often when you're just starting. Just always check your bone pivots, right? Um, don't just export the pieces, throw a bone on it, and call it a day. Um, you know, just just make sure you test it, and over time you will develop a better sense of like where you should place that bone, because where you place it relative to that piece makes all the difference in the world, right? If you can get that correct, then you will have much tighter looking animations. And if you are if you're not super precise about it, you get these obvious mistakes, and the game just looks rougher. Though some games that might work out. Like if that's your style, if you're doing something more humorous or off kilter, that could work. But otherwise, if you want something more immersive, refined, spend a lot of time on this part. Don't skip out on it. And just a tip here. Um, Generally, if you want the two parts to overlap smoothly, right? Circles are your friends. Just kind of put roughly the same size circle behind each piece, you know, and then as it rotates, they won't like get out of alignment. You can also fix these issues with weight painting, but I'm not going to get too deep into that. Okay. This is another kind of more obscure issue, but again, once you get into the advanced rigging, this is a pretty common thing. So you can see on the left, the okay. So in 2D skeletal animation, you can do IK, right? And it makes animation a lot easier, especially a walk cycle. Like once you get used to this, like you can bang out a rig and a walk cycle like super fast, and it'll look amazing. But a common problem is that people often misplace the target bone, right? And you get these feet that aren't properly planted on the ground, which is the whole point of IK, right? If the feet go through the ground, there's no point in doing IK. Um, so why is that happening? The reason that happens is that that happens when you put the target bone too far away from the tip of um, the child bone, right? So it's a super simple fix. All you have to do is just put that tip, that bone right at the tip of that bone. It's super easy fix. I think in the latest versions of Spine, they automatically do this for you. It used to be that it would tell you, oh, where do you want to place it? Now it just automatically places it there. So this is much less of an issue today. But sometimes you will accidentally like animate that out of alignment, and then you'll be like, oh no, I broke my rig. What happened? This is usually what happened. It's the easiest fix in the world. Just bring that target right up to the tip of that bone. And here it is in action. Right? Like yeah, it's off alignment there. It's working correctly there. Right. So you can see the left leg, the target is placed too far away. The right leg is right there. So yeah, I think hopefully in the down the road, this one drove me crazy, drove our whole team crazy until we figured it out for ourselves. So hopefully this will save you some sorrow in the future. Right? Okay. Oh, whoops. All right. Okay. Now we're moving on to animation. Right. Um, just curious, how many of you are animators listening to this talk? I would imagine, given the subject, probably a good amount, or at least, people who maybe you wear a lot of hats. Maybe you're a game designer, illustrator, a coder, and you have to animate. Cool, nice. Oh, really? Uh, okay, Ashraf, we got it. I'd love to talk to you more about that after this. Yeah. All right. So these are some common animation mistakes that I've seen over the years, and I'll tell you how to fix them. This one's super simple. This is just forgetting to turn on auto key. Um, so in Spine, by default, just like a lot of 3D programs, um, you have auto key is on. So let's say, that there. Where's that keyframe? Okay. let's say I wanted to move that back further. That doesn't look great, but just for the purpose of this, right? If I have auto key on, then it does that automatically, right? If I have auto key off, I move it, I press play, and it didn't stick, right? If I turn that off, then you have to move it and then manually say like, oh yes, I did want to key that translation, right? And that's very time consuming. So, um, and yeah, oftentimes there's like a hotkey for this, and you might accidentally turn it off, and then you'll be like, oh, what the heck? Like, why, why isn't the animation sticking? It's typically because you accidentally turned the auto key off. So just a silly problem, but very, very easy solution. Okay, so this is a common, well, maybe it's a bit harsh to call it a mistake, but I would say it's an issue with a lot of beginner animators or just people with no animation training. A lot of times their animation is too linear. So for instance, let's say you're doing here like a classic bouncy idle animation, right? Very, very common in 2D, 3D games. Uh, you can do it in like 2 keyframes, right? Just standing up and down, right? And on the example on the left, the tweening is linear, meaning it is just always the same timing back and forth, back and forth. It's very robotic. Um, it can work, especially if you're actually animating like a robot or a machine, or you want to have sort of like a slightly stiff effect on purpose. But if you want it to be more lively, springy, more organic, it's a really easy fix. You just adjust the keys, right? So get familiar with the curve editor. Every animation program that uses keyframes will have something like this. Um, when you adjust the curve, right, then you're telling it as it's as the animation is advancing down the timeline, you're telling it to come in fast and then slow, and then and then settle in, and you get these more organic animations out of it. It's a really powerful tool. With just 2 keyframes and adjusting the curves, you can get some really good, really organic animations, especially idle animations. Okay. This is one of the best things about Spine. It's actually one of the things that like blew my mind about it years ago when I started using it. There's a feature in Spine, and I haven't tried Dragon Bones deeply enough, but I think it's probably in that too. It's the offset feature, and this is really good specifically for games where we often do looping animations, right? So the offset feature. Here, let me see if I could show it in action for you. Okay, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna make a new animation and sway. I don't know. Okay. Okay. Let's say I wanted to animate like the arm swinging, right? Do I have auto key on? I don't. I don't. Now I do. Okay, I'll key that again. So I'm gonna make a looping animation. Bear with me. Okay. So key all those. And then I'm gonna come to the middle, bring the arm down. Okay. So right now we have like a pretty stiff animation, right? Okay, so first I'm gonna do what I suggested the last time, which is I'm gonna adjust the curves. I'm gonna round them out. take that, round that out. Okay, now we got a little like ease in, ease out. Looks a little bit or more organic, right? Next, I'm gonna grab all of the bones on the arm. Sorry, I actually should have done this first. I'm gonna keyframe all of them. Keyframe all of them. And then now I can go down the arm and start putting a delay. Whoops. Put a delay on these. So let's see, where's that offset? Right, okay. So I'm gonna put, say, 3 frames of delay there, and then go down the line again. Press space to unselect, okay. And then three frames again. Wait, oh, hold on, that did not quite do what I wanted. Sorry, I should have practiced before. Okay, okay. Oh wait, okay, I know what I did wrong. I forgot to actually put a curve there. Okay, now there's actually a curve there. Oop. They've changed the interface a bit since the last time I used it. Um, I'm sorry, this is a bit embarrassing. The interface was updated since the last time I used this. I'm just going to pretend this didn't happen, and I'll get right back into this. Sorry about that. Um, I will. I'll come back to this. Sorry. Okay. 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 This is more of a. Yeah. We can edit that out in post. Sorry. Okay. You don't actually have to. I'm perfectly fine with this. Oh, oh, by the way, that wasn't me. I didn't just fart. That was my brother's dog that's been sleeping here this whole time. Okay. Okay. The next one is a just a piece of advice. So for 2D skeletal animation, we tend to always do these like sweeping arcs, right? Of course, arcs are very beautiful, especially if you study like Disney style animation, dance, um, you want to emphasize those arcs, get these nice arcs. But let's say if you're doing action animation, people tend to like um, they tend to forget that you can do stuff more sharp movements, right? So I think you've seen in a lot of these games, a lot of spine games, 2D skeletal animation games, the attacks are always like just like a big arc, right? Just like a um, and that can look nice, but it gets repetitive over time. So yeah, it's important to remember that you can just do these sharp, straight movements too, and they look quite good if you you know if they can look really good in 2D skeletal animation, right? Not everything has to occur on like a big, beautiful dance like broad arc. Just remember these like tighter, straighter movements are often really good for action animation. Let's see, I had a question there. Is Spine Pro version 3.875 the same as Spine? Basically, just it's yeah, they're all Spine, and they're all if you go to the website, you get a download, and then the way Spine works is it constantly updates, and yeah, it's similar to like using well, like anything these days, like most apps are like, hey man, do you want to update? You know, and you can basically say no for like a really long time. Um, the thing with updating is when they do a major update, it'll give you access to new features. Um, the but sometimes, especially if you're developing a game, this is another common mistake. If you're developing a game, you want to keep everyone using the same version, right? Um, So it can be a big problem if one person updates and then they make a file in the new format, and then all of a sudden everyone else in the older version they can't open that file, and then the game engine doesn't read the file correctly. Sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but to answer your question, yeah, yeah, they should both be spine. As far as the trial version not working, I'm not sure, but we will. I think after this call, we can talk and see if we can work through that. Okay. All right. I'm gonna move on. Um, yeah, basically just try to mix up your movements. Not everything has to be like a big arc. Um, and it's just actually a fun exercise if you're especially if you're animating for games. Like practice animating how to do a punch, kind of leading with the shoulder, kind of having that delay and then the release. It's a really fun thing to animate. Okay. Another common issue, I would say, is that a lot of games tend to have like overly what I call like goopy looking animation. Do y'all know what I mean? Like, have you ever seen like a 2D um, skeletal animation game where they're just like a little bit too bouncy. It's like everything's made out of gummy. Like even if the character is like, a robot or a knight, something made out of hard parts, it's still like, right? Um, the reason that happens is it's so easy to do that with these programs, right? It's very easy just to like do some keys on the, you know, uh, s- just to squash and stretch it. Um, And I mean it's a fine thing to do. Just remember not to overdo it. Like just because you can do it doesn't mean you have to do it like every single time. Yeah. So oftentimes it just things look better if you tone them down and you save that squishiness, that stuff with a lot of secondary animation. Save it for where it counts, so that there is some contrast between the bounciness and the stiffness. Right. That's how that contrast, right? It's like food, right? Contrasting flavors in a dish make it more interesting, right? That's why if you eat something fried, you probably want to put some acid on it, like lemon or vinegar, right? Something to cut through the fat, right? Just the opposites. The opposites kind of come together and give you a more beautiful experience. Yeah. Um, I also recommend animating at lower frame rates. This has actually been a trend in 3D lately. I think, like with like the Spider-Verse movies, right? Have you noticed, if you're into animation, maybe you've heard talks about how they don't animate the whole movie at the full 24 frames per second that film works at. They often, do it on twos, 12 frames per second, which makes it feel more like 2D animation. Sometimes they go even lower, and it's very deliberate, right? They don't do it just for the sake of it. They do it because it matches the motion. Um, I think with 2D skeletal animation, it is similar to 3D, where much of the time it's just interpolated. So the final output is just whatever frame rate the computer can support, right? It might be like 60 frames per second. But I do feel like for 3D, that can work because 3D is sort of a very literal representation of reality. But when you're working with drawings, I find that if the frame rate's too high, it can feel really uncanny. Um, and it feels uncanny because you're kind of losing like that nice deliberateness that makes like 2D animation that the feel really good. Um, so yeah, I recommend lowering the frame rate if it's appropriate for your game. Like try working at lower frame rates. You'll get more deliberate, just concise, not so goopy animations. Like, I think I don't know if it comes through in the stream, but we'll make this deck available, um, and you'll be able to see for yourself, right? Like, yeah, a smoother frame rate isn't always better. It's like, you ever see the YouTube videos where they're like, I interpolated this anime to be 60 frames per second, and then it's like so blurry and weird looking, right? That's what a lot of these games feel like. Yeah. Okay, one last word of advice. Just have fun, right? Just like try different things out. You know, just make funny characters, do stuff that makes you laugh. This was like an experiment where I was like, I wonder if I could do like a rotating cube, and I did. I figured it out. It was super fun. Right? Um, do stuff that you would do in 2D, like those weird smears and blurs. Like the more that you work with this method, the more you can play around and just get some like really, really, really cool stuff going. Right? Experiment with it, have fun. Right. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to keep in touch, I'm terminally online on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now. It's still so weird for me to say that. Um, so yeah, I'm at Richmond Lee, RICHMIND_LE on Twitter, and you can also follow my company Bit Egg. You can go to our website Bit Egg Inc. But really. Uh, You should follow our games. Right? That's way more interesting. So we have our game Zeka Tactics on Twitter. We're all often like posting cool clips and stuff. And then Lost and Found Co is the one that's really um, that's the most interesting one to follow right now because this game will be coming out next year, animated in Spine. So it is 2D bone-based animation, um, and yeah, really excited for that game. But yeah, that's it for the tips. Um, hopefully this was helpful. If it's not helpful now, it might be helpful down the road. Hopefully it was enjoyable. Yeah. So now let's open things up to questions. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. While you're doing that, uh, yeah, think of any questions that you might have, and I'm just going to open up Spine here, and I'm going to try to try to redeem myself. Because yeah, I'm gonna try to uh yeah, they changed up the interface, so I don't, my gosh, things move so fast. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get my muscle memory on Spine back. Any questions? Sure. Okay, so explain how swapping parts of the character for frame-by-frame animation works. Yeah, let me find an example. So can you do it here? Hold on, hold on. So there isn't an example here, but I will find one okay, in those games that we were looking at earlier. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here's like a simple one. Actually, wait. Um, Actually, I think there's an example. Hold on, I gotta restart and then start spine up again. I think I can pull one from the website. Sorry, just give me one moment. Whoops. Okay, while I'm looking for that, I'll try to verbally explain it. So imagine imagine I have like a rig, right? And imagine my arm is a rig. Here, let me push this back. Okay. Oh. Okay, so imagine you have a character and you have, bone here, bone here, bone here, and it's moving like this, right? Frame by frame would be like if I also drew another frame with the hand open, right? Right, so you could have the same animation and then swap out the part, suddenly the hand's like closed, right? Or like let's say I wanted to animate a punch, right? And typically you have the hand like it's open, right? Well then, you would swap the part, turn it into a fist, and then when it goes back, you might actually want to draw another piece, right, of it turning, right? And then, that feels more like a punch, right? Because if you didn't redraw that piece, it would be like a knife hand, right? It's not a punch. Okay, now let me see if I can find, I'm sorry. So yes, the swapping is keyed. Yeah, yeah. So it's the exact same animation, and then you tell it like, oh, okay, on this part, um, I want you to, swap out for this part. Okay. So I think they have a dragon in here. Here we go. I got to download that. Opening it up. I believe this one should have. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so you look at this animation, right? Let me turn off the. Okay. So the wings are the part that are frame by frame animation, right? So you look at this bone here, and see, the part changed. Uh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. The interface changed. So it should be showing me the images there. Let me just, maybe it's in the rigged mode.
Richmond, maybe it's in the bottom left, sorry, in the center where it says images. So, no, right under the dragon. Does it have anything to do with the images over here? So like bones, images, and pixels?
Oh, no, no. So
Or is
that
this
that one
different?
is just, yeah, yeah. Sorry. No, that's a good call, but that one is just to turn off if you want to see the bones or not.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Here it should be showing you everything attached to this node. Um, maybe expand all. Okay. In any case, right. Let me turn that bone back on. So the wing bone is right here, right? They called it the right wing. And as you can see, right, it changes, right? From, you know, kind of like facing the viewer that you can still see, you can see the top side and the bottom side simultaneously. And then the complete transition to just the outer part of the wing. And then as it's coming up, it switches back over to the inner part of the wing. So that's an example of where you would incorporate frame by frame animation into the rotation, and it working together. It creates a really nice, smooth animation with only a few frames on the wing. And a big part of why it looks so smooth is that it's smoothly following that bone. It's getting all those nice tweens every time. So even though it's jumping frame to frame, um, you know, it's really smooth. Yep. Let's see. Any good sources to learn from? Um, so just the Esoterics website, Esoterics Spine. It's really good. There's lots of there are lots of different tutorials on there, and there's also a really good forum. So if you have any questions, you can search through the forum, and also hop on YouTube. Um, there's some really good spine tutorials. I'll post I'll post some after this talk too. So the official esoteric software site has, they have a playlist of all of the tutorials they've uploaded through the years. Yeah, and there's some really good stuff on here. I would start here. Yeah, pretty much everything you need to know is on there. And the nice thing about this is it's going to be applicable to Dragon Bones. Um, so, you know, like take a look at these and then apply it to whatever software that, you actually want to use.
Yeah, actually, when I started learning spine for a brief period of time, I realized that whatever I learned there was extremely applicable to the version of bone animation that they have inside of Unity. So there was a lot of
Oh,
things that I
right.
learned. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I
so that was
think
really, really cool as well.
yeah, you can animate the bones directly in Unity now too, right?
hmm
Yeah,
Sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's not as expansive as spine, obviously, but it got the job done, which is bonking someone on the head. But
yeah,
yeah, the tutorials from Spine really helped a lot as well because they kind of gave the basics of how bones and animation and rigging should work in a way. So that was fun.
yeah. Right. So there's this woman who she does a lot of tutorials for esoterics officially, um, and you can follow her. Oh, cool! She follows me. Awesome. um, at ER1K4R1. She's really good. She does so many of like the best tutorials out there. Um, ooh, she's making her own game. Oh, and Godot too. Cool. So Godot supports Spine. Um, yeah, I think this is probably the best person you could be following if you want to learn about Spine tutorials. I think she makes the best tutorials out there. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Let me check the Discord for a second. Guys, does
Yeah.
anyone have any questions over here as well? Um, okay, I think the Discord is also pretty good. Honestly, this was a really clear session.
Oh yeah.
It was
Okay.
great. So yes, thank you so
Cool.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Uh,
I'm, I'm sorry I dropped the ball a bit. I haven't used Spine in a while, and I didn't realize the interface changed that much. So
Software does
apologies
that
for that.
sometimes.
Yeah. But hopefully, hopefully the other 90% was clear enough. Um, and yeah, yeah. If you have any questions, please you can contact me directly. Um, and I'm really happy to be here, even with those weird
Yeah.
fumbles.
That's what makes it fun,
Uh,
to be honest.
Yeah,
It makes you feel a lot more
this is
homey and
it's
stuff.
live. This is a real this is a real live
100%.
presentation. Um,
Yeah,
Ashraf, thank you for inviting me to give this
of
talk.
course.
Like,
It's a pleasure.
yeah, really enjoyed.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Same here. Same here. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
yep,
Thank you, Richmond, for this absolutely wonderful talk. It was a ton of fun. Even with what you call fumbles, it's just the reality of life, which is really, really wonderful to see. It gives people a bit of confidence that someone with your skill level is also, having to look up tutorials every now and then. So, so that's wonderful to see. Thank you, everyone, for attending and making the session as fun as it is. And I guess we will see you all very soon. Yalla. See you, Richmond. See you, everyone. Take care.
yep.
Thank you.